I need a haircut. Wouldn't it be great if you could just, dunk your head down and shake it and all the hair would fall off? Let's give it a try. Oh yeah, look at that. Pretty good. This is another In the Workshop episode. In this one I'm going to be covering 3 items, 2 of which I use very frequently, and that's my ultimate sanding block here. Put that down. And the other one is my beam compass. Now the beam compass is interesting because several people have made, their own version of it lately. Just a couple of days ago, Matthias Wendel made one. The really only common feature between his and mine is that the bolt is sharpened as the point. Originally I wasn't going to include this one in the video because it's older. It's about 2 years old, or maybe even 3 years old. And the video, I haven't done anything with it. But like I say, other guys have made it lately. Jay Bates made a version, and I don't think he did a video, but he did an article on his website about it, and there's a link in the description to that. He also took the time to take my SketchUp drawing, which was the original plan for this, and turned it into an easy-to-use 1-page PDF that you can print off and bring out to your workshop, and then you can make one exactly like this. And I highly recommend it because this is probably the ultimate in drawing circles. And I mean, it's easy to use and it's easy to set, loosen the wing nut, and then you can, for fine tuning, what I like to do with this is I like to actually walk it. Then I'm holding it up to the tape on the table saw and I'm just walking it over until it's the right size. About a week or so before Jay Bates made his, Jeff Ferguson made one exact copy of this as well. So the beam compass is very handy to have for larger circles. You can make it any length you want. I also have what I call my compact compass, which is this one right here, and I made a video for that as well. And this is a very popular project on my site, and the YouTube video is pretty popular as well. And this can make a circle up to 6 inches like that, or right down to like a 1/2 inch, very small circle. Sanding block is something that I use almost every day. I originally made this about 4 years ago, and it was just an article on my website, a how-to article. The problem that most people have was how to do the sliding dovetail part of it. And the original build was cut into the block of wood. This is actually a piece of 2x4. And then you would just cut this dovetail, and then you would make this one to fit in it, and they slide together and lock in place. In a newer video, I demonstrated an easier way to do it, and that would be to make the 3 parts here separately from plywood, just cutting them on an angle like that, and then gluing them onto the handle and onto the base. The most common comment on the build was, why doesn't it come off, slip off when you're using it back and forth like this? And the reason is the sliding taper dovetail locks it in place. Also, the sandpaper under the edges here help to hold it in place as well. Obviously, if you push too hard, it may come off, but you can also go slightly sideways, and that will ensure that it never comes off. The other most popular comment was regarding the base here itself, whether there should be padding on it. The one I did in the video was just plain plywood. I said in the website article that went along with it that you can put on padding like I did here in this one. It depends on what you want to sand. If you're sanding something that has to be absolutely flat, then you really shouldn't be having a pad on there because it will conform more to the surface. The other project I wanted to cover in this video was my marking gauge. I made this right after I made this, around about this time last year. The thing about this is I don't use this a whole lot. Virtually never, actually, because it's a tool that's better suited to very precise layout for certain things. If you're doing hand cut dovetails, that this would be, at arm's length at all times, but I don't do that kind of thing, so it spends the majority of its life up here. Comments on that weren't really specific to anything. Some people asked about the wheel, whether it's going to get dull. The fact is, it's a washer that is a common size, and they cost maybe 3 cents each, and it took all of a minute to sharpen it on the drill press. So if it gets dull, take it off, sharpen it again, put it back on. Or if it finally reaches the point where it's worn out, which would take a lot of marking, by the way, then you just get another washer, sharpen that, and put it back on. so no big deal. Another comment was about the rod itself. I made a dowel in the video that fits in this hole like that. And somebody asked me why not a square thing. Well, it's easier to drill a hole round than it is to drill a hole square. I could have cut, you know, the piece into several pieces, but I wanted to make it all one piece solid and made the dowel to fit in there. I like the dowel better. It, you know, you can rotate it anytime, any way you want. The cutter on the end there, if it starts to get dull on one side, you can rotate that. Or you can rotate the tool itself. If you're using something like this a lot, you're going to develop a technique for holding it that you want to stay with. It'll feel comfortable in your hand, so being able to rotate the cutter is a handy thing. I also got a comment on the splines in the end here, asked me what they're for, and they are to reinforce the end of the piece of wood. Wood, for those that aren't familiar with it, splits along the grain a lot easier, especially if you cut most of the way through it. It'll split really easily. So I put the splines in the end here to reinforce that. Just to let you know what's going on, I'm at the point where I can start assembly of my blinds project. I've got all of the little knuckles cut out. I did these all by hand. Despite getting the parts for the CNC to make that operational, I just don't have the time right now to finalize it, get it all set up, and then try to, you know, work out a design in the CAD program to run this off. It's going to take me a while to get used to using that, so I just decided to do these by hand. It took me 2 hours actually to make. I got 144 laid out here. If you're on my G Plus page, you saw a picture of it. I just couldn't help myself. I had to lay them out like that. Plus I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I've got 154 of these knuckles, and that will easily be enough for the 3 sets of blinds. People have been asking me about the Westeros table, what happened to that, when am I going to finish that, and I kind of get sidetracked sometimes, and that's going to be the nature of things on this channel. It's not going to be one project to the finish all the time. It'll be broken up by other projects that I happen to decide to do in the meantime. Like the ceiling here, I decided to do that, and I got good results with that, so I decided to do something about the windows in here, and when they're done, then I'll resume with the other projects. The Westeros table, probably in another week or so. After I get the blinds done, I can start in on that. Something else I've been messing around with is a modification to my box joint jig, where it would use a threaded rod as the indexing plate. A lot of people have a problem with the original design cutting out the indexing plate, and as 2 years ago I came up with the idea of using a 3/8 threaded rod as that in its place, but I couldn't get the advance lever to engage correctly in the thing to move it over. Recently I had the idea to use a 1-inch threaded rod rather than a 3/8 inch threaded rod. This has a smaller tooth pitch, which means it has fewer teeth per inch, and, well, 8 teeth per inch actually, which is very handy for a box joint jig because it'll be 1/8 of an inch increments as you go across. And the teeth are also deeper, so I can engage my advance lever in there properly and it'll move it over. This is a rough mock-up just to test the design and to work out any problems that I run across. But the basic idea is that the carriage will overshoot the base by almost 50% on both sides to give you maximum capacity from a small package. So if the jig is 20 inches long, you could make a box joint as wide as 19.5 inches. Right now the jig is moving over 1/4 inch at a time. What I do is I lift up on this thing here, and it releases a screw from the thread so that it can move. Once it's locked in there, it can't move. Lift it up, push the lever in, ratchet it over, let it down, locks it in position. And by rotating this cam here, I can change that to like a 1/8 inch movement, or all the way over to a 3/8 inch movement at one time. So as you can well imagine, I'm very excited about this. It's very easy to build, not complicated. There's no special parts. The only problem that some people might have is getting a piece of 1-inch threaded rod. But there are places online where you can order it. It probably would be worth the cost to have it ordered online as well, because the rest of the jig can be made pretty much from scraps. Here I've made it from some low-cost half-inch plywood, and it's working perfectly. So that's what I've got going on right now. I've had a couple of people ask about the wooden table saw build. The wooden table saw build was never meant to be a project where I would start it one day and I would finish it within a certain frame of time. It might be a year before I finish that saw. It might be 2 years. It's a long-term project. I've got, I'm rounding up parts. I'm trying to refine the design to the point where I can have confidence when I go ahead and start cutting the parts that I'm not going to be making changes at some point, because I really want to be doing this in a one-shot type thing where I've got the design nailed down almost 100% before I even start making anything. I know I ordered the arbor and all that, but I had to have the arbor in hand, and it had to be an arbor that was fairly common, because I want to make plans for this for people to make their own, so that I can point to this part and say, this, you're going to be able to get this part 100%, no problem. Another thing that's been taking up my time is I've been doing some website work, nothing that you can see yet. I've been trying to come up with a reasonably simple responsive design for the website. Right now it's a fixed design. You open it up on your phone and you've got side scrolling and doesn't move around like the more modern things do. So I want to try to get that nailed down. That'll be a long time before it's implemented though, site-wide, because my website has quite a few pages at this point. Quite a massive project to change that over to a new design.